The political landscape in Central and Eastern Europe continues to evolve. With populism on the rise, there's a threat posed to the question of future liberal democracy and the rule of law. Now, with these topics being increasingly urgent, Dr. Lars-André Richter here, head of the Central Europe office of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, brings his wealth of experience in this field to tell us how to promote liberal values in the face of rising populism. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
So let me play the devil's advocate, because there's a lot of conversation involving the difference between populism and democracy. Isn't democracy just a form to propel popular ideas and values?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, that's a real essential question. I would say, I mean, there are some, in the real world, there are some problems. I mean, we have an economic crisis in many countries, not everywhere, but in many countries. We have in many countries a refugee crisis. We have some other issues. Globalization is received to be a challenge for many countries. I think it's a good thing in general, but many countries, many states, or many people consider that to be a problem. So they are real problems, and the populists, they are dealing with that. They are putting that on their agenda, but they have a different style. I think real problems should be put on the agenda of democratic parties and movements and states as well. But the style is the question. The style of communication, the style of debating, that is the difference. And here, Democrats always should be much more diplomatic, differentiated, and much more orientated to the facts.
Right. Can you give us some specific instances in perhaps how the style difference between democracy, democratic values, and as opposed to those of populism?
Yeah, I mean, let me start. That is a very crucial and very crucial question, and I think we could give a day-long answer for that. Let me maybe start with a very general remark. I mean, the rule of law, democracy, parliamentarism, pluralism, market economy, free trade, and so on and so forth, that are products of a very long historical process. We are talking about centuries, not years, not decades. We are talking about centuries that started mainly with the Enlightenment, maybe, so about 200-300 years ago. So that are processes of a process we might call civilization. And the product of this civilization are the diversion of power, a separation of power, for instance, the rule of law, parliamentarism, and so on and so forth. And that needs to be defended by Democrats, and that is threatened by populists. Since populists, they always want to give a simple answer. I mean, populism is about style, that is about dealing with specific topics, but that is about destroying these results and products of a very long process. They want to destroy the institutional complex institutions, the very complex institutions of democratic societies. So populism, to come to an end, in a nutshell, populism means there's a strong leader, mainly male leader, from time to time maybe female, but a strong leader, strong leading figure, and there's on the other hand other people. And there should nothing be in between, no parliament, no rule of law, no whatever market economy. So it's this direct connection. And that again is destroying a very long process and a very complex institutional reality.
Right. You put a lot of highlight and emphasis on the rule of law, and us here in Central Eastern Europe, can you help us understand how, this region's rule of law have evolved and reformed throughout the past decade?
I think rule of law is maybe there are some debates within political scientists and lawyers and so on and so forth, but I think rule of law is maybe the most important base for democracy. So you need a legal base, you need a legal framework, you need a legal order within a community, within a country, within the world, global order. So that is a very basic fundamental issue. And then we can start about talking about the structure of a state, for instance. I mean, more complex, more bigger states need maybe a more complex structure. I mean, as a liberal, I'm always in favor of strengthening the local base, the local level, and then you have regional level. So that is very, very important. But you need, for all of that, you need a legal base, and that is the most crucial issue. And I mean, to come to your question, we have at least two very complicated, very challenging states here in Central and East Europe, and I would start with Hungary. And the second one is Slovakia, a country which had a change in the government, back to Robert Fico, who was prime minister before, but he came back to power a year ago in October last year. And I mean, Hungary, Viktor Orban is again back to the office since 2010, so it a quite long period, 1.5 decades, to reform in inverted commas the country in his sense, authoritarian sense. And Slovakia, under the leadership of Mr. Fico, has a role model, has a playbook, so to say, and is reforming, reshaping, let's put it like that, reshaping the state with a very, very, with an amazing, in a negative sense, amazing rapid thing. So it's really something which should give us a headache to observe the development in Hungary plus the development in Slovakia, since I mean they have been destroying the legal base, the rule of law, in a very, very significant way. And last remark, maybe we saw that here within the past 8 years here in Poland as well, and under the government of peace leadership, the destruction of the legal base, legal framework, rule of law. And then you can do, if that is modified, if that is destroyed, then you can do whatever you want.
Right, so there's a lot of point of contention between clashes between the European Union as well as these countries that you have mentioned. And of course, some of the criticism comes with saying that perhaps there's a little bit of overstepping when it comes to the European Union dictating the policies of individual countries. However, like you mentioned, it is also important for a global order to maintain said rule of law. How do you see it evolve going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex issue as well. I mean, there's always something to be criticized when it comes to what Brussels is doing, the Parliament, the Commission. But in general, I think Europe, the European Union, is a quite important step on this line of civilization as well. I mean, that was the idea to form this European Union and the predecessing institutions, European community, and so on and so forth. The general idea was, or that was an answer, that was a reaction after the Second World War. That was a peace project, a kind of peace project on an economic base, economic cooperation. But that was the general idea, that was the mission. Never again war, so cooperation on a political level, but on an economic level as well. So both is very, very important. And I mean, after so many decades and after several rounds of enlargement, there are some problems, some technical problems, some practical problems. That's for sure. But what is going on, namely in Hungary and partly in Slovakia as well, and formerly in Poland, and maybe then in other countries. I mean, we have a very complicated situation in Austria. We have a very complicated situation in the Netherlands. So in Western European countries, I mean, Netherlands, into brackets, still is maybe one of the most liberal countries in Europe, maybe worldwide. And I mean, they had a quite harsh rollback now towards right centrist, right populist movements and parties. So in many countries, there's a raising criticism towards the European Union, comparing the Union with the Soviet Union. And I think that is beneath contempt from my point of view. Again, I mean, some criticism on some points, too much bureaucracy, too much, maybe some rules too much, that's fine. One can always talk about that in a very, very civilized manner. But to blame the European Union or to compare the European Union with the Soviet Union, that is beneath contempt. That is populism. That is demagogia, and we should always push that back very, very clearly.
Right, and like you mentioned, a lot of these rhetoric are actually gaining ground. We see in the recent European Union elections, be it France, be it Germany, everywhere we see a lot of these kind of populist rhetoric cropping up and people adopting these kind of talking points, gaining significant polls. Is that the trend going forward? Is there a danger there?
I wouldn't say that history has a specific direction. I mean, we always are referring then to end of history. So that end of history came to an end then, and now the end is coming to an end again. I don't know. But I'm optimistic that that is not the end of history. So the victory of authoritarian regimes like China, like Russia, like Hungary, etc., etc. I think even if they are successful, or they seems to be successful, their philosophy of ruling a country, their style of ruling a country, their style of trying to rule the world, I think even that could come to an end. Very important in this context. I mean, you mentioned some national elections, recent elections in Austria, in East Germany, some regional elections. That's right. But I mean, it's clear that the most important election this year is upcoming. That is in 3 weeks or less than 3 weeks. The elections in the United States. It's not clear who will win. But I would say, let's say, if Trump will lose, we might see some problems on the streets in Washington and maybe New York, or in the countryside. But if he will lose, that should be a or we should, as friends, as supporters of the free world and the non-populistic democratic republican in the state sense, not in the party sense, of the republic and a liberal order, we should promote that, as populism might not be over, but populism could come to an end. If Trump, with all this, I mean, Trump is as a figure, I might say that very, very clear, is an insult to human intelligence, I would say. And so that's why it's very important, if he loses, that we say, okay, now let's come back to a more civilized, to a much more democratic way of tackling and solving problems. And in that sense, I'm optimistic. If he wins, then we have a problem, but I'm quite sure we will find ways to survive as well.
All right, so we'll have to see how the situation unfolds. In the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight.
Thank you, pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.